Awesome. So Dan, thank you for joining the HomeLord Podcast. We're happy to have you.
Yeah, happy to be with you guys.
Yeah, we're super excited. You've done house hacking for a long time, and that's how we actually got connected, is through the house hacking world. We look forward to just diving into a wealth of your wisdom and knowledge, and hopefully teaching all of us a lot of new information today.
Well, we'll see what we can do.
I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to read a quick intro so people know who Dan is. So Dan is local to Utah, specifically even Utah County, and he honestly is super active. Every time I talk to you, it feels like you have BYU tickets for something that you're trying to hand off to people, and you love doing all these fun things. So Dan's real estate journey started with a book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, as I feel like most people in the real estate industry has started off with. And that really fed into your real estate investing journey. And you've been a real estate agent for over 18 years. And in your career, you've done over 700 transactions. 200 have been just investor transactions, which is
correct.
Fantastic.
Right.
So honestly, we would just love to learn about you. So we're going to ask some questions, and we would love to just see if you can't teach us a thing or two.
Sure. Sure.
So
always good to be with you. I mean, this is my first podcast ever, so I'm excited to do that.
So far, you're doing great.
So thank you. I haven't done anything yet, so that's great.
Yeah, we'll see here in a minute if you're still doing great, but
we'll see if I don't screw it up too bad. Right?
You and me both. So when you were getting started in all of this, how did you hear about house hacking? How did that come about? What made you want to get started doing that?
Well, the funny thing for me is I hadn't really heard the term when I did my first house hack. So I actually learned how to house hack by doing it. So it was actually later in my real estate career that I actually learned what house hacking really meant. I think a lot of people don't know what it means.
Yeah.
So for me at the time, and you can tell me if this is right or not, because you're more of an expert on house hacking than I am. But when I first bought my first home, literally I was in sales and a lot of my commissions were being held. So 2 months before I bought my first home, we were searching for quarters in the couch to go buy bread and milk. You know?
Right.
So feast and famine, I've always been in sales. Feast and famine is just the way it goes. So when I bought my first home, there was a grandfather basement apartment. It was this house built in the World War II era in American Fork, little red brick house. And we rented out the basement, and the only way we could get approved to buy the house was to rent out the basement. So at that time, the lender was using the income from the future income as part of the qualifying.
That's awesome.
Otherwise, I couldn't qualify. And I remember my payment was $951 a month, and that included a first mortgage and a second mortgage because I basically put very little down, and so my total payment was $951, and then my rental income back then a one-bedroom basement apartment in American Fork only rented for like $450, including utilities.
There you go.
But it made a difference.
It covered about half for you.
It covered about half, and over time it covered more as the rents went up. But up front, it was the only way to get into home ownership, and that's basically the case a lot now. Is it's hard to get into home ownership, so you got to get creative. And so I was paying $500 or $600 a month. My first house.
Awesome. So really quick follow-up question with that, because a lot of people say, oh my gosh, back in the day, I could have bought a house because it was only $950 on the mortgage. But if I'm understanding it right, even back when you were buying houses, it was still hard to buy a house, and you had to make that sacrifice in order to just get anything. And then it just grew from there.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it was hard.
And it was paying half, which is about what people get today when they house hack. It's the exact same. And I was going to ask you why house hacking, but it sounds like that was it was literally the only way you could afford something.
Correct.
Back then. Do you mind me asking what year it was about when
2002 was when I bought my first house.
Okay.
And $951 was a lot of money back then.
Yeah.
So, people are probably listening like, I wish I could buy at $951, but no, that was a lot of money back then.
What was the sales price of the home? I'm just curious.
I think it was $130,000.
Sounds about right. My parents bought their house around the same time for like 150.
Yeah,
But
it was
bigger.
134. It was 134.
There you go.
Yep. And then I resold it. Well, I'll tell you about that in a minute. But I resold it later for more than that, obviously. But,
Yeah.
But yeah.
Very cool.
Okay. Awesome.
So when you first started your house hacking journey,
Yeah.
and you got into, your very first house, that red brick house in American Fork.
Correct.
Once you got in there and you had your basement apartment and it was rented out, would you say that your thought process was like, oh man, I'm going to keep doing this again and again and again?
Oh yeah. That was my goal. I was reading Rich Dad Poor Dad at the time, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to keep this house forever, and it'll be great, and I'll keep buying them and keep adding to the portfolio. So that was the plan for sure.
Very nice. So it was like just a continuous like stepping stone process into your kind of rich dad experience.
Yeah. And we did buy a house a few years later. We upgraded to the next house, and we tried to keep this house, and life sometimes happens. So after owning this house for 4 years, even though we couldn't keep it long term, when we did sell it, we sold it for about 50 grand more than what we paid for it. And we paid off our student loans. We paid off our car loans, and we had just enough money to go to Ruth's Chris and put whatever was left in the bank. And it was a big celebration for us, because at that point we had no debt other than our home.
And now
homes.
Well, true, but just imagine if you didn't think creative and you were just saying, "Oh, I'm not going to do that. I need my own space."
Right.
And if you didn't do that, you wouldn't have gotten that $50,000 that led you to being debt free. You
Right.
would have been back on everything. Like it feels like everything would have just been reset back to kind of like when you started.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And, as luck would have it, things got tight. This was right before the downturn. And we just felt scrimped, and we just decided, okay, we'll sell it. And so when we sold it, it was eating at me. Like for several years after that, we didn't buy another rental, and it was just eating at me for years and years and years. And then eventually I got into buying rentals, and that's when I feel like I started my professional investing career.
There you go.
But that first step is often what gives people the momentum they need to go to the next level.
Like the confidence. Like
Yep.
I did it once, I can keep doing it.
Yeah. And honestly, the net worth too, because, it's really hard to get your first house, let alone buy multiple rentals.
Yeah. It's kind of like you said, it's just taking it one step at a time and just keep building that confidence so that you have, just the trust in yourself that you can keep making it work.
Right.
So.
And your experience was good enough. You wanted to do it again. So when you bought that house, you became a first-time landlord.
Correct.
How did that experience go for you your first year?
So, yeah, I'd say the first year or two, I learned a lot of things. We lived in the house, which made it a little more awkward if we had the wrong renters in the basement. Luckily, our renters, when we lived there, were great. They were wonderful renters. But then when we moved out and we were trying to rent both sides, we didn't have a property manager at the time, and everybody had their sob story, and we didn't really follow the rules as far as you only rent to people with these ratios, and you check their credit. We didn't know how to check people's credit. We were just kind of hacking it as we could,
You just don't know what you don't know.
Exactly.
So you wing it.
Yeah, we were winging it by far, and I did have to evict my first people, and I had no idea how to evict someone, so I just got a 3-day notice, put it on the door, and they left. I was like, that was great. So
that's a good first experience.
Yeah, I'll say that. Good luck.
It worked out okay for me. But what it was is they were breaking the rules, and I said, "You're breaking the rules. Yeah, you got to leave." And they listened. So.
And even after that, you're still here today and you're investing. I think a lot of people think like eviction is the end of the world when it's not.
No.
Like you literally put a piece of paper on the door and you probably didn't really fully understand what it meant either, but they left. You got the same result.
Yeah, and I've had to evict people since then a couple times, but usually
the known risk.
Yeah, usually with the way we work, when people can't afford it anymore, they come to us and ask, can we get out of the lease? Which is way better than going to a house that's been vacant for months and you had no idea. Someone just left.
Someone just left, right?
Yeah.
So then because obviously you've had a lot of experience with both good and bad tenants.
Yeah.
So if somebody what would you tell somebody who is looking into getting into a house hack, but they were just nervous about like the property management side? What kind of advice would you tell them?
Well, first off, there's tons of resources out there on property management, and here in Utah, there's a lot of mentors that are out there. I've learned so much from my mentors over the years. So for me, it just got to where I was just too busy to manage it myself, but I can manage them. I prefer my property managers because they're so much better at it. But if you're down to the wire as far as income and you want to manage yourself, just make sure you don't give in to those crazy sob stories, and make sure you check their credit. There's actually ways to check it for really cheap. Make sure you check their backgrounds, make the phone calls. If you spend a couple hours before you give someone the place, you can avoid
yourself like weeks of
avoid sometimes months of headaches.
I believe that.
You know, there was I inherited a property one time where I brought the tenants in. You know, I bought it with the tenants in the home, and had to. The judge, I wasn't there. My property manager went to court for me, but he told me the story. The judge is just like, you haven't paid rent in 6 months and you're complaining about a window that's leaking air. Get out of my courtroom.
So leaking air. I haven't heard that one before.
Yeah. He's like, the landlord didn't replace my window. It was leaking air. And I hadn't even heard his complaint. So that was the funny part, but he's like, just get out of my courtroom. So, I mean, yes, sometimes you have to evict, but it's not the end of the world. There's eviction attorneys that make it really easy. And,
thankfully you're in a landlord
plenty of resources too. Yeah, I've heard stories of other states where it's definitely
a lot harder.
You know, you squat in a house and all of a sudden you have rights to stay there as long as you want.
I did an eviction in California. It took 18 months.
Wow.
Yeah, it was awful. We went back to court, I think 5 times, and every time they delayed, it's another 3 to 4 months.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, but California problems. But going back to what you were talking about, never moving there. Bringing up the points you brought up previously.
Love to visit there.
First time landlord, there's a lot you don't know, but you still tried, and you have a lot of good feedback about. If you have like a mentor or someone who can like just give you some guidelines to coach you, like it makes a world of difference, and you avoid a ton of those mistakes. So one of the things that Justin and I like that we love doing with the HomeLord program is when people house hack for the first time, they become homelords, a homeowner and a landlord. They don't know what they're doing, but we give them the roadmap. So kind of like how you've learned to have success over a few years, you avoid all those costly mistakes because you're given a plan from day one. And then you're successful, and it makes you want to keep doing it again and again and again because you know how to basically solve all those problems that can come up.
Yeah, and that's great that you have a program for that, because some people lean too much on the knowledge. Some people lean too much about just jumping in fast. The fact that you bring those together is great.
Yeah, I love it when people are like, I want a tenant with an 800 plus credit score. And I'm like, you're never going to find them.
I'm like, same.
Yeah, I know, same.
They do exist occasionally. Maybe once in a lifetime you get that tenant. But yeah,
like, it is possible, but...
they typically buy at that point.
Eventually they buy. Yep.
Believe it or not, there are good tenants with 650 plus credit scores and whatnot. But like helping people that have done this, like at my peak, I've managed over 500 rental properties. And so like... I've seen everything from the worst to the best, and some, you just learn what works and what doesn't.
Yeah, for sure.
So one question that I have is, because obviously we heard your experience of how you started, it was with house hacking, kind of how you scaled a little bit as well. And now when you're buying these properties, you do a lot of fix and flips, and you're always putting basement apartments or ADUs in them as often as you can. That's actually how we got introduced, just because I found a lot of them.
Right.
So I guess, do you think house hacking is just the inevitable future of getting into real estate? Like, do you think that that's where all of real estate is going, where affordability is, or do you think there might be another way?
Yeah, well, first off, we have a problem. We have a problem with people's net worth. I have a thing on my phone. It says $10,000. The average net worth of a renter is $10,400.
Yikes.
The average net worth of a homeowner, and maybe this is at retirement. I don't know how they judge this, but the average net worth of a homeowner is $396,200. So that might just be the average. So for someone that's owned real estate their entire lives, it's probably higher. But 396, that's 39 times the net worth of a renter. And a lot of people will talk and say, hey, you're never going to be able to afford a home. Homeownership in America isn't what it used to be. And that's flat not true. We need to fight. We need to figure out ways. We need to, in Utah, it's harder right now, but it's still worth it. I've had 20 young 20s buyers just this year get into home ownership for the first time. So it's not impossible. It's just harder. It's just more complicated. And house hacking is a really good way to get into it. And I feel like it is in some ways the only way. For me, it was. And I think moving forward in the future, it's going to be the only way for a lot of people. Yeah.
Well, we just had someone close this week, 22 years old, still in school.
Yeah, still in college, hasn't even graduated yet.
Yeah, graduating soon. Yeah, dude's going to be a legend when he's older. But It's so fun seeing young people get into it. And he found a way to do it too. Like, I know it was tight, but it's possible. You just need people to help you figure it out.
Yeah, so I wasn't in my 20s when I started investing professionally. I was in my early 30s. Mm-hmm. And but I'm trying to get people started in their 20s because it makes them that much more ahead as they get older and more further along in life. But one thing that I was told when I was new at it is, because I was big on it, I read the Rich Dad Poor Dad. I was like, I want to do this. Let's go.
Heck yeah.
And I didn't have any money, but I had a lot of ambition. And my mentor said, buy a home every single year, and within 10 years, you'll be a millionaire. And I was like, okay, I don't have any money now, but I'm going to buy a home this year. I'm going to figure out a way. And within a couple weeks, I was sitting in this big mansion in Alpine, and the lady is like, would you list my home for me? I'm like, sure. So I go over there. I'd never done this before, at least not a mansion, right? So I get over there, and, at the time it was $1 million. In today's dollars, it's probably $3 million.
Right.
She sits down with me. She's like, you know what? I've made a horrible mistake. You're not the agent I thought you were. And I'm like, that's okay. I'm here to help. And, within a few hours, I was, within a few hours, she went back and talked to her family. And then I had to come back a second appointment. And that's when she awarded the listing to me. But I was competing with some of the best agents in the area.
Dang, good for you, man.
And she asked her kids, she's like, should we choose the new guy, the energetic young kid, or should we choose this experienced agent? They're like, go with the new kid. So, for me, it was a blessing. I think it was providence, personally. But that's what started me on my journey. I sold that first home, took all the commission, because I wasn't used to making that kind of money, didn't know what to do with it, put it towards a flip, put the repairs on a credit card, took all that money, put it towards my first rental, and then once a year from that time on. And it can be 10 years, it can be less as well.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. And I feel like it's unfortunately so much on social media and so much on the news. It's just so easy for people to take the victim role.
Yeah.
And what we're learning from you, real experience and what we've seen with helping people, you don't have to play the victim.
Right.
All of the knowledge is out there. All of the systems exist. There's people who've done this for like 20 years.
Right.
We've just collected a system that has all that information gathered into one spot. But you can absolutely get out there and buy a house. You're not going to be stuck, Yeah,
and it's not just me. I'm helping these young kids get going as well. I'm trying to do the same thing you're doing, and we need to do deals together.
Yes, we do.
We need to do some deals together. We've been trying. We need to get on that 1 a month program we've been talking about.
Yes. If that happened, my life would just be a better place.
Yeah.
I want to highlight too, though, that you also started in your 30s, and a lot of people think in your 30s it's too late.
Right.
Which is not true. I mean, even if you start in your 30s, like by the time you retire, like even if you have a few properties, like that's huge.
Right. And I was 31 years old. I thought I was a failure at the time because it was right during the downturn. Everyone's home values were less than what they paid for them. And I didn't know I was doing the right thing at the time because I felt like a failure. But as soon as I could, I got into the real estate investing, and it's definitely a game changer for me.
Can't imagine a world where Dan thinks he's a failure.
Is that crazy?
Oh,
though?
it
Like,
happens almost on the daily,
years?
but
That means you're doing it right.
but then I put my shoes on and I'm okay. We're good.
I think you're too hard on yourself.
Yeah, well, I think real estate's just like anything. It's the more you do it, the better you get at it. And when you've done 700 transactions, you're going to know a few things more than when you did, your first transaction.
That's such a
My
My
wild
first
number.
couple transactions, I made so many mistakes, and it's kind of like a little kid learning to throw a ball. You ask them to play catch with you. They're like, I'm not good at ball. I'm like, well, you just need some practice. Let's just toss it back and forth. And after like 5 or 10 minutes, these kids are like beaming. And all they just need is an adult to encourage them. And I feel like real estate's the same way. You if you haven't done it before, you think it's hard, but once you've done it, yeah, it's not hard.
So what you're saying is, if you want to get into real estate, especially if you're going to buy a home, you should probably have a realtor, loan officer, or some kind of specialist who can not just teach you, but encourage you so you can be successful.
Yeah, you need a whole room of people and just use them all. Use and abuse them. Yep.
Sounds good.
Coming soon, Dan. Get ready. But to kind of wrap up, I have the last two questions we want to ask. The first one is, in your opinion, because real estate seems to just be this big hairy beast that most people just don't really know about, and then when you throw house hacking in there, it gets overwhelming pretty quick. So what are some of the main talking points about house hacking that you think are like, I don't know, underrated? Like, what are some of the benefits that not a lot of people are talking about?
Gosh. So yeah, I that's a tough one. I feel like a lot of people, they're just scared of the unknown. They're scared of renting to someone. They're scared of what if they trash the house. They should be scared of 10,400 net worth is what they should be scared of. You know what I mean?
That's a good point to put. Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's a pathway to home ownership, and some people love it so much they don't do it any other way. They just, every time they buy a house, they make sure the builder puts a basement apartment, even if it's in half the basement. That's a rental, right? I was working with a builder who always said, I never build a house that I'm going to live in without putting some type of rental in the basement. And the cities are making the laws that have been passed make it a lot easier now. It's fully approved to do ADUs. So you can, some people, there's a 20, 30-year-old house that is grandfathered in, but they don't call it an official duplex in American Fork or Lehigh or whatever.
Right.
And they're like, I can't buy this house because it's not official. And, I get that, but now you can do it, and the cities are putting their blessing on it. So that makes it a lot easier to get, everyone on board.
Well, I own a duplex like that. It was grandfathered in,
Right.
based on the new laws. But yeah, the housing shortage in Utah is just so bad that for the most part, they'll let you do it.
Yeah.
And then pull the right permits, that kind of stuff. And then I'm curious to know for you, like,
always check with the
zoning-wise.
city, though. Always check with the city, because you don't want to get into something and think you could do something and find out you can't.
Yeah.
I think I know where Joel's question's going, and this is
Okay,
perfect
go
time
ahead.
for it.
No, you go for it.
Oh, no.
Well, I just wanted to know, for like zoning and your experience with all the investment deals and house hacks you've done, have you had any issues with getting zoning approved for a house hack, or did you check?
Yeah, I mean,
you did it.
What was last week, right? I mean, it's always a thing. So we just did one in Orem where we had the full city as approved. This was a big project.
Yes,
I've
I know
shown
that
you this
project,
house.
yeah.
Anyway, we took it from, it was probably the worst house in the whole city.
How many dumpsters?
Everybody knew about it. It was
How many
over 30
dumpsters?
dumpsters.
And they were
Hoarder house?
They're not like hoarder house, and it wasn't just like the typical little dumpsters. They were like 40-foot long, like
Full size.
dumpsters.
Right. Yeah. So it was a lot. It
Not
was a lot
40,
of
they're
work.
20 feet, but they're
So,
massive.
so we did the whole thing. The city put their approval on the whole remodel, but because the ceiling height going down the stairs was too low, and there were a few other things, they're like, you can't call this an ADU. We're like, okay, fine. So we called it a mother-in-law apartment. The next homeowner, if they decide to do more projects, they can get it to where it's an official ADU.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you got to work with the cities, and if you're buying a house, it's up to you what you're willing to put up with, basically. But if you're selling a house, for me, I'm just the salesperson, right? So I always tell people you need to check with the city to find out what you're allowed to do and what not allowed to do.
Yeah.
Not allowed to do.
Yeah, always better to be on the side of the city than to deal with them later.
Right. Right.
Because it's bound to happen eventually.
Right.
Okay, I think we're at time.
Yeah, no, I think that wraps everything up. Dan, thank you
thank
for
you so
coming
much.
here, sharing your wealth of knowledge, and helping us realize that we need to get good renters in to our property so we don't have to evict
That's a
them.
good
Go through
idea.
all the other things. And
it's never too late to start.
yes, never too late to start.
Living proof.
And that renting net worth is just not worth it.
Renting net worth. That's right.
Renting net worth
Statistically
is
is
just
not
not
in your
worth
favor.
it. You want to be you want to be an owner net worth.
Owner net
So-
worth.
But yes, thank you again, Dan. We appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, guys.